This is the interview with myself, Reggie, and Brandon Eldridge. Today we have a very special guest. He is one of Hollywood's most hard-working actors, from HBO's The Pacific, on set of Eminem's 8 Mile. Please welcome Joshua Bitton. Joshua, thank you for coming on today.
It's a pleasure, boys.
So, Joshua, you've had roles in NCIS, CSI, Magnum PI, Grey's Anatomy, The Pacific. What's been your favorite role to date that you've done?
I think there are different roles that sort of have different value or experiences. Like working on The Pacific, the guys that I worked with on that job are amongst my closest friends in the world, let alone in the business. So, and on top of the fact, the historical relevance of it and the fact that we're telling real men's stories was really felt really important, and also one of the best times I've ever had on a set in a location. We were shooting in Australia. It was amazing. But there are other things that I've done that have had like a tremendous impact on me. I did a guest star on a show called Harry's Law that not a lot of people saw, but it was.
Is this the one regarding the gay rights?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
So I have a very dear friend who's gay and basically had to choose between breaking up his relationship or moving to Amsterdam because his partner of many years had been deported, and at the time gay marriage wasn't legal in the US and they couldn't get married to keep him here. And he wound up leaving. And they've done remarkably well. I mean, really, really well. Super successful business. I think they're millionaires at this point. So it's kind of a perfect end to a shitty story. But when I got that script and auditioned for it, I remember thinking, if I get this role and I don't do this justice, Ken will never forgive me for having an opportunity as his friend to represent his struggle. So that one was important to me because of the personal sort of significance to it. I just did this TV series for CBS All Access a year and a half ago called $1. And it was similar to The Pacific. I walked away with some of the closest friends I've made in a long, long time, and worked with this director, Craig Zobel, who is just an artist. So the whole process of that was really fun, really exploratory. So off the top of my head, those are the first three that come to mind for sure.
That's great. And if I'm correct, you guys did a boot camp for The Pacific, I believe.
Yes, we did.
Before filming. And I think it kind of ties in nicely with that they're the closest friends you've got now. So what did they make you do at the boot camp? Where was it, and what did you have to do?
So we were. I don't think I've ever really told this story publicly, but
so this is a great place to tell it.
Yeah, all right. So this is a real personal story, but it's kind of the beginning of the bonding of it all. We were in Australia. We were in far north Queensland in the northeast, sort of sandwiched between the Great Barrier Reef in the ocean and the Daintree rainforest. So we had to line up in these uniforms they'd given us that we barely knew how to put on at 6 o'clock in the morning to load onto buses, to drive what we didn't know for how long, and what wound up being into the rainforest. So I get on the bus, and I'm literally in the farthest back corner seat, and John Sato, who played Barcelona, is sitting next to me. And we've known each other for like a couple days at this point. But he's from Jersey, I'm from Queens, both in around New York. We're kind of neighborhood guys. So we kind of instantly bonded. But as soon as we sat down, I had to pee like really bad. and with the bus starts moving and it's packed with guys. And I lean over to him and I say, "Hey man, I think I got to take a piss." And one of the Marines who was training us screams from the front seat, "Shut the fuck up back there. Shut your fucking mouth." So now I'm like this, and we're holding these bags with all of our gear. We were in that bus for a good hour and a half, 2 hours. And I thought at one point, can I pull my helmet out and just pee into my helmet and no one will notice? Which I did not do. But God bless John Seda sitting next to me, just trying to be positive, is sitting there going, I think we're almost there. I think we're almost there. Now, he has no idea where we're going, but he's trying to make me feel good about it. And after an hour and a half, I mean, I was in physical pain, and we get off the bus, and I don't even know how to talk to the Marines. Like, I don't know the proper way to address them. And I say, excuse me, Sergeant, I need to take a piss. And he goes, go ahead, go. And as soon as I take a step, he says, belay that, which means stop. And he goes, 1 second. At which point, a company of 65 men start marching what winds up being a 5-mile march. At one point, we have to go single file over a tree that is spanning a large stream or a small river, which slows us down. Everyone carrying these giant bags, balancing, going over this tree. It must have taken 40 minutes, more, to get where we had to go. And I'm dying. I'm like sweating. I have to pee so bad. And finally, they go, we get there, and they're like, all right, first group of guys go pee. And I'm pretty sure I peed for 4 minutes. I was peeing so long that all the other guys went back, right? And they were yelling at me, nobody else gets to pee until everyone's finished. And I'm like, there's just no stopping this. So that was the beginning, right? Then it was just a combination of like physical stuff and mental fucking with us. They told us to build our tents, which were called hooches. They were 2-man little pup tents. So we all built them. Next thing we know, they're yelling at us, who told you to build these, line these up east to west? They go north to south. We don't know what direction is what direction. So now we're just frantically pulling them apart and trying to do them. And then we put them together, and they're like, they're supposed to be 8 inches apart. And, you know, they're just doing this to basically tell us, you listen to us, you don't think for yourself. Yeah. Then I remember I was sent to get garbage bags, and I went to the guy who was our gunnery sergeant, Freddie Joe Farnsworth, who's one of the best dudes in the world. And I said, can I have some garbage bags for the machine gun platoon? And he's like, here you go. And I said, thank you, gunnery sergeant. And he goes, did you just fucking thank me? And I was like, what? I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, because I thought he was mad that I didn't. And he said, Marines don't say thank you. Marines don't say fucking thank you. Marines do their fucking job. You tell me to do a job, I fucking do it. At which point, I now have to stand in front of my entire platoon, which is like John, James Badgedale, Josh Hellman, Jacob Pitts, Keith Nobbs, Eamon Farron, you know, Ian Meadows, Arkosh, and also Shaw and Sigourney Neville, all these guys who are former Aussie military who are working like right with us. And they're doing 25 Marine Corps push-ups, which is 50 push-ups. A Marine Corps push-up is down, up, down, up. That's 1. And I'm counting 1, standing in front of them, and they're going, thank you. 2, thank you. And at that moment, I was like, okay, I'm never going to make a mistake again. So there was that kind of stuff. There was a lot of weapons training. We learned how to take apart the air-cooled, the water-cooled machine guns. The mortar guys learned how to take those apart, how to set them up. We got to the point where we could set up the air-cooled machine gun. I think the fastest we did it was in 9 seconds, ready to fire. And the water-cooled, which was way heavier, I think we did in 17 seconds.
Wow.
We would run every morning, you know, calisthenics, push-ups, etc. But then there were drills, how to cross an open field, you know, and there was a Japanese boot camp, and we could hear them through the forest. And then one night at who knows what time, because no one had a watch, we were on watch, machine gun fire opened up on us. Now it's all blanks, but there's fire, and then you start screaming like contact front, and everybody starts running out of their tents, waking up, firing our weapons, setting up a perimeter. You know, then we got attacked by a sniper in the jungle, and we had to do a sniper hunt, which is a really intense thing where you run and dive and crawl and try to draw fire and triangulate. And so it was physically intense. I lost 12 pounds in 9 days.
Wow.
So what is that, like 5K, right? I don't know how many stone that is. You guys are going to have to do the math for me. And I was I said this in an interview once, I was a college athlete, and that was the hardest physical thing I'd ever done. And at day 4, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. By day 6, it became the most like gratifying and bonding thing ever. And for sure, you know, it was run by Captain Dale Dye, who's the guy in Hollywood. He's a hardcore Vietnam vet, Marine lifer. And he was a first Marine, which was the division we were representing. And it was really personal for him. So he's told us, he said, this is the hardest boot camp I've ever run when it was all over. But it made us a family. It really, really did. Yeah. And I have to say it's the best rehearsal process I maybe ever had in that regard.
Just talking on the Pacific, obviously the cast is so big, like the names so big. And I believe it was 10 years ago this year, the Pacific would have been. Do you feel like there are, of course, you're all such a big family. There's not been another, in my opinion, another mini series that shows such aspects of World War II. Do you believe we'll ever see such a mini series like the Pacific again or similar to it?
I don't know. It's a really interesting question because it's so different than Band of Brothers. You know, Band of Brothers was created pre 9/11. So to me, Band of Brothers always felt like a celebration of what, you know, our grandfathers did. You know, not mine. My parents are immigrants, but, you know, sort of the grandfather, that generation, the greatest generation. Yeah. And the Pacific was definitely a different thing. It was a look at like what war does to people. Yeah. And so it's far darker. I don't know, you know, Tom and Steven have another one that they are in pre-production for about the air battles over Europe. Oh, and right. Wow. Yeah. And so I don't know what that's going to look like because they're brilliant. And I feel like every time they do this, they sort of take a different angle on war. You know, I thought the film 1918 had, which I thought was brilliant.
That was great. Yeah. Great film.
It's not a mini series, but it definitely looked into the horror of war in a way that I think, personally, I think that might be the way. I think it'll be hard to make a war film in these times, without addressing the fact of the toll it takes. Where I think before we'd celebrate, like, look at these heroes, and then we kind of didn't really take a look under the hood at what happens to them, you know? Yeah. So I hope so. Because I think if we're going to address it, we should address it with that kind of depth.
Yeah. And of course, Tom Hanks producing the show, going into the Pacific 10 years ago, what was that like knowing that you'd be working with him and Steven, of course, as well, producing the show?
I didn't have this experience just because of the role that I wound up playing and testing for. But a lot of the guys who were in it tested for either Barcelona, Sledge, or Lecky, and then from that they cast them in other roles, like Jacob Pitts. I think he tested for Lecky, John Bernthal, but apparently what happened at that audition is the first actor to walked into this room, and there's Tom Hanks at a table with like all these executives from HBO, Playtone, DreamWorks, and there's a guy who's reading with them, and there's a camera operator. And holding this little handheld camera is Steven Spielberg. Yes. So the first actor walked in and went, and he came out and he was like, and he goes, guys, just so you know, Spielberg is running the camera. And they were all like, what? They all told the story exactly the same, like, what? And then they would go in and Steven would be, you know, like working the camera. Yeah. So for me, I didn't have that. My last test wasn't with them in the room, but I did get this phone call, which is probably the greatest phone call I've ever gotten, and maybe the greatest phone call I'll ever get in my life. My agent called me, Charles, and he said, "So you are Tom and Steven's first and only choice for this role." And I said, "I'm sorry, I need you to say that sentence again." And he said, "So you're Tom and Steven's first and only choice for this role." And it was wild because I thought I would like leap for joy, but what really happened was it was like everything went and got really quiet. Yeah. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. And then, you know, Tom showed up in boot camp on the first day and gave us his speech and told us we were allowed to laugh, which we were afraid to do because we were scared of the Marines. And and he said, "Hey guys, this is fun. Don't forget that." And I don't know, man. It's a real honor. I mean, they're 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 giants of the industry, but they're not just that. They make some of the greatest things that ever been made. And when Tom Hanks walks up to you on set, points at you like that, walks up and shakes your hand and says, "Man, I really love the work you're doing." I couldn't really wrap my head around it, to be honest. It was pretty wild. Yeah.
I mean, for me, Forrest Gump is literally my all-time favorite film, so I couldn't even imagine for you how that would feel, seriously.
Yeah, you're sitting there going like, "This is Forrest Gump. This is Philadelphia.
Yeah.
This is any number
Every
of
great war movie that's ever happened, he's produced or it's just
yeah, it's them. They made Saving Private Ryan. Like, what is happening? How am I here?
Yeah.
So going back to what you were saying about being an athlete, I know that you used to play baseball. So why is it that you chose an acting career in performing arts rather than becoming an athlete in baseball or any other sport?
Oh, well, first, let's be realistic, right? I'm 5'6", so my baseball career was not going to go past college. And funny enough, John Bernthal and we realized when we first met and we were talking about where we went to school, we played college baseball against each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But the real truth of the fact is that when I was in college, I was playing ball, and a buddy of mine convinced me to take an acting class, and I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And I got truly bit by the bug in a way where it became an obsession. I was like, this is the purest human contact I've ever had. And I was going into my third year of college, my junior year, and I had a choice, essentially, to keep playing ball or to do As You Like It, the Shakespeare play. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to have a lifetime as a baseball player, but I think I want to have a lifetime as an actor. So it was a conscious choice in that regard. Like, I stopped playing ball to act. Was my career going to go past college? Absolutely not. No way. Right? Do I sometimes wish I would have played 2 more years of baseball? Yeah, because I love the sport and I love competition. But for the course of my life, I think I chose the right thing for me.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Thank you, guys.
So, looking at Google today, we were just going over a couple of things, and I came across this interesting fact that, according to some sources, your net worth is between $4 and $5 million. Now, me and Reggie are probably worth about $2 each.
Yeah.
Right now,
For sure $2.
What do you think about that? The fact that there are sources that are saying that you're worth between $4 and $5 million. And this is based on salary, the credits that you've had in your career so far.
Okay, first of all, and I went to the #1 math and science high school in America, right? A public school. So I'm a math guy. That's why I have a pie tattoo on my arm. And they're insane. Like, I don't know where that number comes from. I would love all that money. Look, I own a home, and my home, I think, according to like real estate websites right now, is worth maybe it's worth $1 million, right?
Wow.
So I could sell my house. Yeah, no, that's crazy. Now the thing about it is, in realistic terms, if I sold my house here for that much money, if I wanted to buy a house, I would essentially be buying a smaller house or a same size house, because it's not. Now, if I left LA or decided to live in an apartment, so like I have that kind of security. I do not have $4 million. I wish I did. I would be a lot less stressed. In so many ways, especially during this quarantine and COVID, it's at this point, it's like pooling money, but I have nowhere near that kind of money. And I want to know where they get the numbers from and who I can call and be like, hey man, somebody owes me like $3 million, because I would do amazing things with that money. I promise you.
I'm sure.
I promise.
Touching on, of course, the cast of Pacific quickly. I did watch an interview. It's probably a 9-year-old interview now. It was with John Bernthal when they were talking about the cast, and he was talking about how much he enjoyed working with you all. And then, of course, he moved to such a big thing of The Walking Dead at that time. That same year, I think he moved to The Walking Dead. He went to, I believe, 2010. So I was just wondering, the connection you have with the cast of The Pacific, do you get that? Like, is that so rare to find in Hollywood nowadays, do you believe?
Yeah, John, I mean, John and I talked about it when I was shooting $1. John's wife is from Pittsburgh, which is where we were shooting. So at one point, him and his family came to see her parents. So we all spent time there. And he asked me how the shoot was going. And I said, you know, John, these men and women are like family to me. And he said, it's amazing, isn't it? And I said, yeah. And at that time, John said, you know, there was the Pacific and there was the Walking Dead. And those are the two jobs that he was like, I created families. A lot of it just has to do with the transient nature of what we do. You know, I've made remarkable friends on sets, but because we live in different cities or just live on opposite sides of this massive city, we don't see each other as much as we want. But those two jobs created family in the way that theater tends to do. You spend such an intense amount of time with people, and being on location helps, because a lot of times you're removed from a lot of the other parts of your life. So really all you have is each other. So I think it is rare. I mean, I've worked on a lot of a lot of different shows.
Yeah.
And those two are the ones that stand out to me as the closest relationships I've built. So by the math, a couple out of 50, you know, is a different thing. It is a rare thing, I'd say.
And one thing I've of course would love to touch on is, of course, you worked on the set of 8 Mile with Eminem, which as a hip hop fan is just, I want to hear about it completely, how you got it, how it happened, and what it's like working with Eminem, because that is just such a crazy job to get.
So the story is as it goes. My buddy Jamal, who I went to drama school with, he had an audition for the role that Mekhi Phifer got. And Mally Finn, God rest her soul, was the most thorough casting director like you could ever see. And I'm just going to turn these notifications off, boys.
That's fine.
So we don't get interrupted. She asked everyone who came into audition to bring their own reader in New York. And I found out from her down the line, that was her way of seeing twice as many actors, which was amazing. 2 guys waiting in the lobby didn't have readers. And Jamal was like, stay, bro, read with them. So I read with them. That wound up at Mally asking me if I would be the reader at the callbacks with the director, which was amazing. At the callbacks, they gave me a callback, completely surprised. I read, I left, I get a call from Mally. She's like, it looks like we're going African-American with the role, but we would like to fly you to Detroit to play Eminem's role in the screen test. So I fly to Detroit. I read with a bunch of actors, and that was 9/11. So that day, the world stopped, and
cool.
And I was living in New York at the time, and my whole family was. And my stepbrother worked in the South Tower of the World Trade, so I'm trying to make sure he didn't go to work that day, and which he didn't. And in the middle of the day, Curtis Hanson knocks on my room door and says, hey man, I don't know what you're doing, but I don't know how to get through this other than to work. Would you want to rehearse with Marshall and I? And I was like, sure, because I didn't know what to do either. So we all started rehearsing, and Curtis would kind of give me an adjustment. And I'm a hip hop fan, and I was a big hip hop head in New York. That was my whole community. So Em and I kind of shared a language in a way, and I would basically translate acting notes or techniques into language that I think Em understood.
Right.
And that was that. And then later that day, or maybe the next day, he tested the other actors. Eventually we got home, and I got a phone call again out of the blue saying, would you come back to Detroit and work with Marshall for a couple weeks? And I was like, sure. I packed a duffel bag like this big, like 2 changes of clothes, some workout clothes. Well, 2 weeks turned into a month. During that month, they added Mekhi and Omar and Evan, and we're all rehearsing. At the end of which, they called me into a meeting, and I thought they were going to be like, thank you so much for working with him. Good luck. And they said, we really feel like you're part of the family, and that you have a good effect on Marshall. I think he feels comfortable with you. Would you stay? And I was like, yeah. So for 4.5 months, I used to stand at the monitors with Curtis Hanson and Carol Fenelon, his producing partner, with headsets on. And after every take, Curtis would say, what do you think? And this is Curtis Hanson, who's like one of the best directors in Hollywood. And I'm like, it was good. I think this moment. And he would go tell him. And then I would chop it up with him and be like, yo, da, 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 da. And he'd be like, cool, cool, cool. And he would do it. And it was awesome. You know, M to me is one of the most misunderstood people in the world. He is funny as can be, like one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. He is not a troublemaker. What he is a smart ass. And he's like the kid in the back of class who makes everybody laugh. And when the teacher's like, Marshall, what are you doing? Rather than saying, I'm sorry, he's like, fuck it. He'll do something again and they'll laugh more and he'll get in trouble for it. But everyone's like, that's hilarious. I mean, he's a tough guy. He's got edge. He's also the greatest, maybe he's one of the top 5 lyricists of all time, in my opinion.
I believe he is the best, for sure. And
watching him work was incredible. I mean, when we heard Lose Yourself, he called us in. He had a trailer as a studio that was a trailer that was a studio.
Yeah.
And I'm with Mackay and Omar and Evan and Brittany was there. And we're listening to the song. And I'll never forget, I'm standing next to Mackay Pfeiffer. And this lyric goes, no more money for diapers, no more movies, no Mackay Pfeiffers. And myself and Omar like grab Mackay by his traps because we used to always do that to each other. And we're like, ah! And he's like, ah! And we just went ape shit. I mean, I haven't seen M in years, but I truly have nothing but love for that guy. That job too, you know, I didn't bring it up because I was an actor. Yeah. I'm still friends with a lot of those guys. Big O and I talk all the time. Omar Miller. When I see Evan, you know, which unfortunately isn't enough, it's nothing but love. Same with Mackay. Like, and if and when I get a chance to see M again, I mean, that is a great guy, an amazing father. He's the best. He's so funny, man. We laughed. All of us laughed for 4 months. That's all we did.
I did see one of your interviews. If I'm not mistaken, was you talking about you potentially had something to do with a lyric in one of his songs? Was it to do with your brother or something along the lines of that?
Yeah. So when we were early in the rehearsal process, Em and I were sharing stories. It was just him and I and the director, and we were just kicking it. And I told him this story. My brother has had quite a sordid past, right? He's many years clean from heroin now, but he was a hustler. He was a drug dealer back in the day, and he was about as tough as, you know, as I've encountered. So my brother's super punctual, and we were meeting out one night to go out, and we were meeting at a bar that my friend was the bartender at, and my brother wasn't there when I got there, and I was like 10 minutes late. And I was like, "Where's Mike? In the bathroom?" He's like, "No, Mike's not here yet." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird." I went to the bathroom. I got a drink. I drank it. I got a second drink. I drank it. I was like, "Where is Mike?" And this is just like pre-cell phone, where like some people had them, but you had to have like money to have a cell phone. And my brother comes in finally like 20 minutes late, and he's like agitated and he's like really hyped up. And I'm like, "Yo, you okay?" And he's like, yeah, cool. Where we going? And I was like, "What is going on?" And he told me this story about how he accidentally cut a guy off on the highway. And as he put it, and I gave him my bad hand, which you know is a big deal for me because my brother normally wouldn't do that. Well, he went from this highway to another highway over the Williamsburg Bridge from Brooklyn into Manhattan, cut down to Canal Street, went all the way across town, parked his car, and this guy followed him the whole way. And when my brother got out of the car, the guy came at my brother and said, "Hey, motherfucker, you cut me off on the Grand Central Parkway." And my brother goes, "So I reached under my front seat, I grabbed my meat cleaver, and I went after this motherfucker." And I said, "You grabbed your what?" And he said, "I grabbed my meat cleaver." I said, "Mike, why the fuck do you have a meat cleaver in your car?" And he said, "You know, in case something like this happens." And he goes, "Now the guy's running like a little fucking scared bitch." And I'm like, "Oh, motherfucker, you got a problem with me?" So he runs into his car, and I take the meat cleaver, and I'm like, and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he fucking drove off. So then I fucking threw it back, had to find a different fucking parking space. That's why I'm late. And I'm like, what fucking world am I in? So I tell Marshall this story, and he's like, "Why did your brother have a meat cleaver in the car?" And I said, "Apparently in case something like this happens." And so and that was the end of it. And he had told me this other story that was super funny. And the only song on the album that I didn't hear before we wrapped that movie was My Dad's Gone Crazy. And I was driving in New York. And at this point, you know, man, like I miss these guys so much. We had so much fun. And they're like, new shit by Eminem. I think it was like on Hot 97 with the radio station. And it's a song my dad's gone crazy. And all of a sudden I'm listening and I hear this lyric that goes, 9mm heaters stashed in 2-seaters with meat cleavers. And I went, motherfucker. That's what he was always doing. Like watching him do his thing, he was always constantly taking anything that he saw and turning it into lyrics, you know?
Yeah.
And he'd be like, Motorola soda holder, Coca-Cola Motorola soda holder. And he'd laugh, but he'd write down a little bit and you'd see a little bit of something arrive in a song. And it was just, you know, it was just amazing, man. As a hip hop fan, it was amazing.
If you want another $3 million, you could just copyright that song. It'll be all good. You'll get all that money back.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what it is.
That's what it is. It's the Eminem song. That's what it is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, you've been consistently doing professional acting since 1999. You've got 69 acting credits to your name, probably more that we don't know about. What advice would you give to up-and-coming actors and actresses who want to try and stay as active as you?
Look, I'd say there's a number of things I would say. I would say go get trained, get yourself in a good class. Get yourself in a class, or if you're lucky enough to get into like one of the great drama programs, especially you guys have some remarkable programs over there. But if you're taking a private class, I tell people I think they should have like one of a few different experiences when they're in the class. They should either watch the class and go, oh shit, I didn't even see that. Like, yeah, when the teacher's talking, or when they give a note going like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And then also, you've got to feel comfortable with the manner in which that teacher teaches. There are teachers who are like drill sergeants. There are teachers who are super loving. And it really just depends on what works for you. And I think that that's important. I think another thing that's important, and I teach acting classes out here, and it's almost a joke amongst my students, but I say this a lot, and it sounds cheesy, but it's really true, which is like, you have to know that you're enough. You have to know that your authenticness is really your selling point. In that regard, it's the only thing that no one else can do. And I think a lot of people try to do scenes right. They try to do scenes what they think is the proper way, and they lose that thing, you know? Like you talk about the boys from the Pacific. I'll never forget it. I had a serious girlfriend at the time when we were shooting, and she said, what is it like? And I said, you know, these guys are the most authentic people I've ever met. They're all themselves all the time. And it's why their work is so good. They're not hiding. They just are them. And it's amazing to kind of experience. And the other thing is that, you know, look, the business is rough. It can be, you know, it's a long road. Some people hit quick, but in my experience, it takes time. You know, when we got back from 8 Mile and I decided to move to LA, Evan Jones, who played Cheddar, said to me, hey man, just a heads up about LA. I know people are like, oh, you're M's coach, shit's gonna pop off. He goes, 8 years, 6, 8, 10 years is kind of what it takes for you to get some traction. And I booked the Pacific, I think he said 5 to 8 years. And 5 years after moving to LA, I booked the Pacific. 7 years after moving to LA, the Pacific came out. And 8 years was when I went from a guy who did the Pacific to booking consistent guest star roles with the occasional recurring, and then some bigger jobs like The Night Of, or, you know, or $1. So it's a long road, and it can be super fun, but it can be super challenging. And it's super challenging to that like feeling of being enough, because it subtly starts to make you think like, well, maybe I'm not tall enough. Maybe I'm not small enough. Maybe my voice isn't deep enough. I mean, I've gone through the whole thing. I need to lose weight. I need to gain weight. I need to deepen my voice. There's nothing I can do. I'm fucked, you know? And at some point you get to a place where you go like, this is who I am. This is what I bring. And I think when you hit that place, your work levels up, and hopefully the amount of work you get levels up, but that too could take a little bit longer. You know, you just don't know.
Right.
Okay, so you did actually just answer my next question. I was going to say what has had the biggest impact, but it's obviously the Pacific, like you just said, and then it took a couple of years, and you booked the Pacific, and then obviously from there you got consistently more roles. So what I will ask is, you can only choose one out of every role you've ever had, out of everyone you've ever worked with. Who would you most want to work with again if you had the opportunity? But you can only choose one. You can't sit here and say, oh, I want to work with the guys from the Pacific, but I really love the guys on $1. You can't.
You're such a fuck.
You have to choose one. You're going to get a text message saying, I saw the
Yeah.
and,
No. You've completely put me in a horrible position.
You've already said enough nice stuff about the Pacific guys, so maybe someone else you should say you'd work with.
Well,
maybe
it's funny.
A little bit.
Like that. Like my thought was, on $1, I worked with this actor, Ashley Atkinson.
Yeah.
And Ashley and I have become super close friends. She was in BlacKkKlansman. Ashley is just an amazing actor. And we had this moment on screen where basically my character is a cop and he's at the steel mill that she works at, and we have to get DNA swabs from people. And so we have to get these DNA swabs, and I ask her for a DNA swab, and she says something really saucy to me, like, oh, I need my spit for later, buddy. And then I have to ask her again if I can go and look in her locker. We have to search her locker, and she goes, all I got in there is my unmentionables. And my line was, I'm just doing my job. But she said it to me really saucy, and I guess I responded like, I'm just doing my job, ma'am. And it got really flirty, right? And at that moment, the writers saw it, and they started very slowly and very subtly adding in this little brewing potential romance between our characters. And I would love to work with Ashley again. I love her so much as a person, but we got stuff to explore. You know what I mean? We got we just vibe when we work. We're like, anything is possible. And you're right. Like Badge, Bernthal, Seda, Keith, Jacob, like any of those guys. There's so many, but you asked me for one, so I'm going to pivot away from the Pacific because if not, one of them is going to get mad. So
the last two things I want to touch on before we wrap up here is one, obviously we're from England, UK, so if you could talk a little bit what growing up in Queens is like, because of course many people watching this might not know where that is or what it's like.
Yeah. Queens is one of the 5 boroughs in New York City. I believe it's the highest concentration of languages spoken in one area because it consists of immigrants from all over the place. It's very New York. Everybody talks like this. It's a very in-your-face fucking place.
Yeah.
I joke with people out here in LA because people wear flip-flops a lot. And I say, and I mean this, it's a joke, but I mean it. I can't wear flip-flops because if I can't fight or run in my footwear, it's useless to me. Right. And that was New York. And that was Queens in the 90s, in the 80s. Like, it was a rough place at times.
Yeah.
I grew up in a relatively like lower middle to middle class neighborhood. But the attitude of that area was you had to be ready to kind of knuckle up. And I by no means was the toughest guy in my neighborhood. My brother was amongst the toughest guys in the neighborhood.
Yeah, he sounds it.
Yeah, so it had a lot of edge. But it also, because of that, was a really fun place too. I'm really good with, I've been blessed with the ability to do a lot of dialects and things like that. Because I think I grew up around so many of them. I grew up in a totally multicultural part of the city, people from Puerto Rico, Greece, Italy. My father's from Morocco. My mom's a Polish Jew, is a child of Holocaust survivors. There are Haitian neighborhoods. There are Korean, Chinese, Japanese. So food, all that stuff is all available. And it's so condensed that people have to be direct with what they think and what they feel. So it's very much kind of in your face in that way, which is something that I'm kind of quite comfortable with. I think it's why I'm comfortable with, like, I worked with a British actor on $1, Nathaniel Martello White, and he's from London, and we vibed immediately because London has a similar kind of vibe. It's like, get to it, tell me what's happening. I don't have time for too much niceties, As Brits, you guys are just nicer than us in general, but
only to each other's faces.
That's true. That's one thing I like about Queens. Someone didn't like you, you knew.
I mean, that's the same where we're in a town called Watford. I know you never would have heard of it, but it's next to London. It's very similar. Okay. People are it's just a very honest but kind of rough town at the same time. But it depends kind of where you are. There's a big love for the soccer team here. That's a big, as you would say.
Yeah,
anyway.
sure.
pains me to
Football,
say
I get it.
that. Pains me to say soccer, but I'm a big football fan myself. But no, it kind of depends where you are. But there is, in our town especially, there's a lot of knife crime still. Obviously, we don't have access to gun stuff, but knife crime, especially in the recent weeks, have been off the charts here. Like, it's been crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can get what you mean when you say you can relate with London and stuff. And the last thing I really want to touch on was talking about kind of, because it's a big thing in England here, and as it is in the US too, is what mental health, how important it is to talk about mental health within Hollywood.
It's really important. I mean, obviously now with COVID, mental health is important for everyone in the world.
Of course.
Because it's so, but I think it's something you have to tend to, I'll say it. I go to therapy, and it's a kind of thing that growing up as a kid in Queens, I would have scoffed at that idea. But my acting teacher, William Esper, who passed away a little over a year ago, who was one of the greatest acting teachers that our country's ever seen, used to say that an actor should never be without class or therapy, because you always need to be discovering yourself. And I believe that. I think you need it for your career and your art, but I also think you need it to weather the near misses, the close calls, the watching friends get super successful, which you're happy for, but not having that yourself. The moments of just personal, loss and disappointment. Whatever it is that you choose to do, I think it's really important. And I think you see a lot of it because in our industry, there's definitely a lot of people, who dabble or have trouble with booze or drugs, because a lot of times I think they're using those to soothe old wounds. Because most people, and this is me as an actor and me as an acting teacher, most people who are good at this come from something that was tough.
Right.
Like some kind of childhood trauma, something. Yeah. There's got to be something a little bit off in you to go, that's the career I'm going to choose. But if you do, figuring out a healthy way to take care of your head and your heart is super important, I think.
I do have one more thing. Of course, it's okay to not talk about it. It's something that has been in England anyway, and it would be nice to get your perspective on it. There's a lot of talk, I don't really know how to put it in a nice way, but within Hollywood about obviously there being some sort of kind of circle of pedophilia there and stuff. I was just wondering, as an actor who's within Hollywood, how you kind of feel about that speculation and what you might see or hear around set, because it's a really big thing that's blown up in England at the moment.
Look, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. If I was aware that someone I was working with was molesting or raping a child, I would get arrested because I would beat them with the nearest thing I could find.
Yeah.
Personally, look, I think it exists. I know it exists. I have very many dear friends who dealt with it, but the ones I know who dealt with it, most of the time it was family members, an uncle, a father, a brother, a cousin. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because it definitely does. I've worked on a lot of sets. I've worked with a lot of people. I've never even heard it whispered. And to me, it seems like a pivot away from some of the other major issues that are at play. Like I see on Facebook a lot, oh, you're worried about COVID, or you're worrying about, the lives, like Black Lives Matter and things like that, but you don't care about pedophilia. And I constantly, when I was allowing myself to reply on Facebook, which point I'm like, this is an echo chamber, there's no point. I would write, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, who doesn't care about pedophilia? Like, who's okay with that? Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So to me, it seems like this big conspiracy theory. And what sucks is that it is happening in some place. There's some people in this business that do crazy. Fucking Jerry Lee Lewis back in the day married a 13-year-old girl. That's pedophilia. You know what I mean? But I've never heard of this like massive ring. So either I'm not famous enough to be part of it, or I have friends who've become famous, and I can tell you, like, they're not doing that shit. For me, it feels like a smokescreen, because people think, well, this is a bad thing. Let's talk about that. And I'm like, well, that is a bad thing. So is COVID. So is the fact that in our country, you're 2.5 more times likely to be killed by a police officer if you're a person of color than if you're white.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And that's not to say all cops are bad. I have friends who are cops who are great cops. It's all very complex. But I feel like people are trying to strip it down to this weird conspiracy theory, and I just haven't seen it. And I hope I never do, because if not, I'm going to go to jail.
Of course. Well, thank you for your time for joining us today. We really do appreciate it, and hopefully we can have you on sometime again.
I love it, boys. It's really good to see you for real now. And if you guys need anything, you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And thank you guys. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.